Hello, my friends. How are you? Welcome to another episode of 30 Albums for 30 Years, 1964 through 1994, where we take a look and a listen to the most impactful albums between those years. So that's 30 albums for each year, totaling 900 albums if things work out the way I hope. I am your host, Jay Sweet. Before we get into today's album, I do want to mention we've added listeners in yet another country, making it 30 countries that are checking out this podcast. We recently added listeners, or a listener, maybe a singular listener, who knows? I don't get that information, but in South Africa. So I want to welcome my South African listeners and all my listeners. Thanks so much for supporting the show. Now today is an interesting one. We're going to check out a record called The Sonics. Here Are the Sonics, recorded in 1964, released on Etiquette Records in March of 1965. So check it out. Here are the Sonics. So unlike many of the bands or artists featured on this podcast, the Sonics are not as well known to the general public, but their influence is as much about their music as their concept. So when you think of the Seattle sound, the first bands that often come to mind are Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, Alice in Chains. And if you're a little bit older, maybe you think of Jimi Hendrix and Heart. But before any of these groups existed, the Sonics emerged. The Sonics can best be described as a garage rock or proto-punk act. Their sound was raw, their guitars were distorted, their playing was rough, their vocals were aggressive and they were edgy, and they played really, really loud. All these characteristics filtered into punk and grunge music. So let's learn more about the group that may have started the Seattle sound, the Sonics. The Sonics formed in 1960 in Bremerton, Washington. The group was led by teenage guitarist Larry Paripa, and like all bands, the lineup changed a few times before the group settled on their classic lineup of Jerry Rosley on lead vocals, organ, and piano, Larry Paripa on lead guitar and vocals, his brother Andy played bass, Rob Lind on saxophone and vocals, and Bob Bennett on drums. In 1964, the Sonics released their first single, The Witch, on Etiquette Records, which became a regional underground hit. In 1965, they released their first LP, Here Are the Sonics, the album we're discussing today, which was crudely recorded on a 2-track recorder using only one microphone to capture the drum sound. The record is considered their best. Now, their follow-up record was Boom, which was released in 1966, and the group continued to record using crude and less refined techniques for that record. In 1966, they also began opening for major acts, like the Beach Boys, Jan and Dean, Jay and the Americans, Herman's Hermits, the Righteous Brothers, the Kinks, the Loving Spoonful, the Mamas and the Papas, the Liverpool Five, and the Shangri-Las. Later in 1966, the Sonics were convinced to record using a more polished sound. So they headed to Hollywood to record in a better studio with better equipment. The result was the album Introducing the Sonics, which sold poorly and angered their core fans, who preferred the band's more rough and edgy sound. In the late 70s, the record was re-released as the Sonics' original Northwest punk. The band began to fall apart in the late 1960s. Saxophonist Bob Lind left to become a fighter pilot in the Vietnam War, and eventually each member sort of peeled off, with the exception of Jerry Rosley, who remained in the music business and reformed the Sonics several times. The original lineup reunited in 1972 for a show at Seattle's Paramount Theater, resulting in the album Live Fans Only. In 1980, Rosley fronted an all-new lineup playing songs from the classic lineup. And in 2007, Rosley, Larry Paripa, and Rob Lind reunited with newer members Ricky Lynn Johnson on drums and Don Wilhelm on bass, and recorded a live session for BBC Radio. So despite their limited success, the Sonics influenced many popular acts. Kurt Cobain of Nirvana discussed the group in a radio interview and said, "I have to admit, the Sonics recorded very, very cheaply on a 2-track, and they just used one microphone on the drums, and they got the most amazing drum sound I've ever heard. Still to this day, it's still my favorite drum sound. It sounds like he's hitting harder than anyone I've ever known." The White Stripes named the Sonics as one of the bands that influenced them the most, calling them the epitome of 60s punk, and claimed that they were harder than the Kinks, and they were punk long before punk. LCD Sound Systems and the Hives have also named the group as an influence. In 2018, Jordan Albertson released the film Boom, a film about the Sonics. He was a fan who decided to make this film, and with the help of Mike McCready of Pearl Jam, the film was released and created some more interest in the Sonics. All right, cats, it's needle dropping time. Let's do this thing. Let's drop the needle on side number 1, track number 1. The song is The Witch, which was written by Jerry Rosley. It is the group's first single, and it is considered possibly the most edgy and heavy recording of the era, and an example of early proto-punk. The song was recorded in Seattle, Washington, and according to sound engineers, the Sonics were only happy when the studio's VU meter, which measures overmodulation, was continuously in the red. They broke the rules. It was too edgy for most major markets. The song was played on smaller Seattle stations only, and although The Witch never charted nationally, it is considered an important early rock recording. It's both terrible and great at the same time. It's going to make you itch because she is the witch. Do you love me? I think you at least like me because you're listening. You don't have to, but I'm glad that you are. And track 2 is in fact Do You Love Me, which is the Sonics' take on the often covered R&B classic written by Motown founder and owner Berry Gordy for the group The Contours. The Sonics don't change the song much from the original, it's just more raw. Take notice of the call and response between Rosley, lead vocalist, and the band, and here we hear Rosley's screams, which he does throughout the album. The guy liked to scream. Do you love me? And do you love this song? Let's find out. Roll Over Beethoven is our third track, and of course it comes from Chuck Berry. We've already discussed this song when I reviewed the Beatles' second album in season number 1. Larry Paripa is a pretty good guitarist, but nowhere near as polished as Chuck Berry. But he does a fairly solid job on this one, and the group really amps up the volume and the energy on their version. Rosley goes a little bonkers on the piano. There's really no chance that if Beethoven heard this, he wouldn't roll over in his grave. In fact, he was a pretty angry guy, and would have likely threatened to kick their asses if he heard his name mentioned in a song like this. So roll over Beethoven, and for the rest of us, let's enjoy the song. Track 4 is Boss Haas. It's another track written by lead singer Jerry Rosley. It was released as a single in May of 1965, and the song is about a car. The tune is hard driving for sure, includes a pretty solid sax solo by Rob Lind. Sometimes I don't have much to say. This is just pure rock, it's simple, it's edgy, and I recommend this track. Boss Haas. The song Dirty Robber is our next track. Dirty Robber is a cover song by the group The Fabulous Wailers, who were another rock band from Seattle from the late 1950s into the 1960s. The Wailers' bassist was Buck Ormsby, and he was the one who signed the Sonics to his label Etiquette Records. They remained with Etiquette for only 2 albums before moving to Jordan Records later in 1966. Bob Bennett is bashing the drums pretty hard on this one. Rob Lind takes a saxophone solo, and Larry Paripa plays an early distorted guitar solo. The song is essentially a fast shuffle blues. Check it out, Dirty Robber. The final track on the original LP side number 1 is Have Love Will Travel. It was written and recorded first in 1959 by singer Richard Berry, who also wrote the hit Louie Louie. This is early riff rock at its best, and possibly my favorite track on the record. It's basically how a dude will travel just about anywhere to hook up. The drum sound is pretty full considering how it was recorded. Have Love Will Travel, and we will listen. All right, my friends, still together? Still with me? Good. All right, let's do this together. Let's flip the record, drop the needle carefully on side number 2, and our first track on side 2 is the song Psycho. It's another Rosley original that was later released as a single, but not until 1967, and it sounds an awful lot like How Love Will Travel. I mean, it's basically the same riff. Lyrically, the song is about an overstimulated guy, I would assume a guy, whose baby, which is his girlfriend, is driving him crazy. There's a sloppily handled key modulation towards the end of the piece. Within the track, we get some more screams from Rosley. He's now doing this a lot as the album keeps going. There's a drum break from Bennett, and it's a perfect example of how unpolished energy can sometimes really make the Sonics boom. Psycho. Money, that's what I want. And I'm not getting it from this podcast because I don't charge anyone. But that's cool because it's an act of love. And Money, That's What I Want is also a song written by Motown's Berry Gordy, another one. And money he did receive. He was quite successful. Now, the song was initially issued by Barrett Strong in 1959. Then the Beatles, who clearly seemed to have influenced the Sonics and everybody else, recorded the tune in 1963. Then many others jumped on the song about cash to make cash, including groups like the Kingsmen, Junior Walker and the All-Stars, and the Flying Lizards. The deeper into this album you get, the more you start to realize that for the time, Larry Paripa was a pretty good rock guitarist. I think he's kind of underrated. And the drum sounds like a cannon on this one. Money, that's what I want. It's what most people want. And it is, again, the name of this track. Walking the Dog is our next track, track number 3 on side number 2. It's what my dog wants me to do right now as he's staring at me as I make this podcast. His name is Mambo. So hello, Mambo. He's kind of looking at me. And anyway, let me get focused here. Walking the Dog is the Sonics' attempt at an R&B blues, and it works pretty well. The song was a signature hit for Rufus Thomas in 1963. Paripa is again impressive on this one as a guitarist, and the song compares well to the other 1960s bands like the Rolling Stones, the Animals, and the Kinks, who also favored similar material. Recommended, Walking the Dog, and yes, Mambo, you will be walked. The Night Time is the Right Time is another popular R&B classic that was originally recorded by blues pianist Roosevelt Sykes in 1937. The song has quite a history. After Sykes, Big Bill Broonzy recorded a version in 1938. I like that one a lot. And in 1957, Nappy Brown recorded a version that gained some attention. And then it was Ray Charles' 1958's version that made the song a signature piece for the blind singer and the pianist and a minor hit. 1963, James Brown also had a notable release with the song, and then the Sonics version. And this one makes for a good comparison. You can check out the Sonics versus Sykes and Broonzy and Nappy Brown and Ray Charles and James Brown and a host of others. Not sure if he sat on the mic stand a few times during this recording, but Rosley screams a lot on this one. It's like, are you injured, dude? What's going on here? But anyway, enjoy this track anytime, night or day. Strychnine is a pesticide that kills small animals like birds and rodents, and if ingested, it causes muscular convulsions and then death through asphyxiation. Well, Jerry Rosley decided to write a song about it, telling the listeners that some folks like water and some folks like wine, but he likes the taste of straight strychnine. I will stick to water, and I will definitely stick to wine. He encourages the listeners to try it, as it will, quote, make you tough and make you shout. It will even knock you out, end quote. This is the most punkish song on the album and really encapsulates the spirit of the Sonics. Do not try strychnine, but do listen to this song. The album closer is Good Golly Miss Molly. It's an extremely up-tempo remake of the 1956 Little Richard classic, showing off once again the band's raw energy, Rosley's piano playing, and I'll say strong vocals. It's a great album closer, and it sure is a ball. Good Golly Miss Molly. All right, my friends, we did it. We made it to the end of the record, and we are better for it. So let's lift the needle off the album. We'll put it away, and let's sum it up. The Sonics, here are the Sonics, 3 exclamation points at the end, is a showcase of pure rock and roll. It offered an alternative to the thoroughness in terms of the writing, arranging, and productions of other 1965 albums that were sort of very much analyzed, like the Beach Boys' Today and the Beatles' Rubber Soul. You will not find the Sonics, here are the Sonics, being talked about in a music theory class or something along those lines. It's not that. It's simple, and that's the Sonics way. The Sonics knew the formula. It was easy. Catchy tunes, unrestricted energy, hard-driving beats, overdriven guitar solos, and the more than occasional lead singer screams. And all of this was done in one room with a few mics by a bunch of energetic young men. And that, my friends, is rock and roll. And that, my friends, is the Sonics. Here are the Sonics. All right, well, I hope you enjoyed today's program, and I hope you continue to listen. To learn more, 30 albums for 30 years, that's the website. I'm on social media, easy to find, you know how to do that thing. And quick plug, my book, A History of American Music, 1750 through 1950, an origin story. That's Kendall Hunt Publishing. If you want to support the program, as I mentioned, it's comes to you at no charge. That would be a good way to do so, to check out the book, and I think you'll enjoy it as well. So together, let's keep this music alive. Have a wonderful day, and I'll speak to you soon. Peace.